Hi everyone, I'm Tom. Welcome back to our YouTube channel and the Big Analytics Query. Today we'll be talking about data visualizations and analysis with Matt. So welcome, Matt. So Matt, why don't we introduce ourselves? What do you know about this topic other than everything?
Wow, that's big praise. So Matt Neilson, Principal Consultant at Simpson Associates, been here 10 years with experience of business intelligence projects, with a specific focus on data visualization and mainly Power BI.
What should we know as a broad overview about data visualizations? When we say that word, what are we talking about here?
So I guess data visualizations are really the way that we turn data into information. Mm-hmm. So you've got loads of tables and rows of data, but if you just leave it as that, then individual users have to go through row by row, trying to remember all the values and then all the previous values from other rows to try and build like a mental picture of that data, which is just an awful way to do it unless you've got photographic memory, genius level, which most people aren't. So what we do with the data visualizations is they're just a way for us to aggregate data to a higher level, slicer it, filter it by different dimensions, your sales by month, your university applications by course or something like that. So we're aggregating that data to a higher level to just make it easier to work with. And that just makes it so much easier to spot trends and correlations, spot outliers or anomalies, those insights that we can then use to inform our decision making.
So essentially it's just a way of understanding the data and making it clear to the people looking at it. And I'd argue almost a good way to get answers when you want to understand the data better.
Yeah, exactly. It's just much easier to work with, much easier to understand. And most people are going to be doing data visualization because they have questions that they need to answer. And yeah, you could go away and just go through, like I said, row by row, looking for those answers. But it's when it comes to convincing people to actually make decisions based on that data, you could just go to them and say, yeah, I've looked at the data and I think we should do this. You're going to have a much better time persuading them if you show them a nice, easy to understand visualization. If you need to take some action because your sales are low, for example, it's going to be much more convincing if you show them, a massive chart with a line going down like this, rather than just saying necessarily, sales are down by 10%. If you can see that and visualize it, it has way more impact than just saying it.
I guess you sort of started there, but what's the business impact? Why should businesses use data visualizations?
Well, it's data analytics in general. It's the difference between making decisions based on gut feel and hunch, and making decisions based on actual data, informed decisions. It was a few years ago now, but I worked with a museum that had this widespread belief that they got more visitors when it rained. So, it makes sense. It's raining, so people don't want to, sit outside or anything, but they still want to do something, so they go to a museum.
Makes sense.
So we collected data from a weather API, collected, visitor numbers data, plotted them against each other to have a look, and there was no correlation whatsoever. Absolutely no difference, whether it was rainy or sunny or whatever. So that's a really good starting point. It doesn't mean that hunches or gut feel is wrong, but it means that we've verified it, and now it's going to lead to loads of other questions. Okay, so the weather doesn't impact visitor numbers, but maybe something else does, weekends, public holidays, things like that. So it's a really good starting point, and that's going to lead us into sort of that analytics pathway. So that starts off with, I've got to remember the right order now. So it's descriptive analytics, so what happened? And then that leads to diagnostic. So why did that happen? And we're sort of going through levels of sophistication here. Once you know what's happened and why it happened, then you get to predictive. So what's going to happen? Yeah. We can see all these different factors, have an impact on the likelihood of something happening. So let's predict what's going to happen. And then after that, you get prescriptive, which is we know what's going to happen, or we have a good idea of what we think is going to happen. What do we do about it? And that takes us through sort of levels of sophistication, and that could be years to get through to that predictive bit, because that's all, or prescriptive bit, because that's all, machine learning and time series forecasting and things like that. But yeah, it's just, you're actually making decisions based on verified data rather.
So I guess that's a good kind of overview of the why and the how, and you've got those 4 levels. But what's the first kind of step in the process of actually making this happen?
So we use this sort of principle, I guess. I don't want to call it a philosophy because it sounds really pretentious, called storytelling with data.
Yeah.
And that essentially is just it's a series of techniques and a process for building visualizations that tell a story, because, like I said earlier, that's just way more impactful when it comes to influencing people to make decisions. So storytelling with data, I think it's a concept that it was Cole, Nussbaum, and Knaflic, who was a former Google engineer who sort of came up with it, building on lots of other people's work as well. But the first step in the process is just understanding context. Why do you need to analyze this data set? What are you looking for? What questions do you have? What are your organization's goals or your department or team's goals? So what do you need from this data set? What questions do you need to answer? Once you understand the context, why are we doing this analysis? That's when we move on to choosing the right visuals. So if you need to compare different departments to each other, for example, then let's choose a bar chart. If we need to monitor trends, then let's choose a line chart, for example. So we know what questions we need to answer, and we know which visualizations we're going to use to answer them. Next, we want to make those visualizations as easy to understand as possible, which means reducing the clutter. So many times, look at a report that someone has built, and there's grid lines everywhere, and there's borders, and there's like 20 different colors used for individual bars.
I guess it just distracts you when you're trying to look at everything at the same time.
Yeah, you have to think people's attention is finite. It's a finite resource, and the more information you bombard them with, they're just going to get overloaded and turn your report off. Go do something else. So you need to be very careful with what you draw your users' attention to, or just what you include in your visualization. There are a few techniques we use for going into that. After that, to reduce the clutter, this is a long process. So we've gone through and we've reduced the clutter in our visualization. Next, we need to highlight the things that the user is actually interested in. So if they've said that they need to know where sales are down in a particular location, let's make that red, that information. If something's down, make it red, stick a down arrow on it, make it bold, so it grabs our users' attention. But also conversely, so in the same way, if people aren't interested in when sales have gone up, don't highlight it. Don't stick an up arrow on it, don't turn it green. You're drawing people's attention to something that they have said they're not interested in. So why are you bothering?
I guess it sounds that 4th step is very similar to that first step, actually. It's almost just completing the circle of going back to why are you doing this to visualization and analytics in the first place. Yeah,
that understanding context, that first step, sort of underpins and influences everything that comes after it to which visualizations you choose, because depending on what you're looking for, you could represent the same data in multiple different ways. So you might choose a bar chart if you're looking at comparing sales across departments, but actually if you're interested in trend instead, then you're going to choose a line chart. So why you need particular bits of data is going to influence how you show it. And the questions that lead on from it as well. So sure, you've answered, are sales going up or down? But then there's a question after that, maybe why are they going up or down? So that's going to inform which bits you highlight for the next question. So it really underpins absolutely everything else that you do.
So I guess given how important it is, do you have any top tips or just really basic principles into how to truly get that context from the people? Because often you're building reports sometimes for somebody else entirely. So how do you sit down with them, have that conversation and get that information out of them?
So we use a technique called storyboarding. Dead simple, dead easy technique. We just generally start off with asking them what are your actual goals? Your team, your department, your organization, at a very just high level, what are you trying to do? What are you what your goals, it could be increase sales, it could be increase membership of your gym or something like that. And then we ask, what are the main questions that you have to hit those goals, or to know whether you're hitting or achieving those goals. So put that you can do it on a Post-it, you can do it in PowerPoint. We use a tool called Figma, where you can just drag a box on, write a question at the top, and then underneath it, we write down what answers that question.
So you're staying far away from your visualizations tool at this point. You're just trying to sit down effectively with a whiteboard and just find out what they want to know.
Basically, I don't care what visualizations you currently use. I don't care what data you have at all. It's completely irrelevant, because if we do a load of stuff and it turns out you don't have that data, first of all, what are you doing? Second of all, we'll just get the data. We'll work out how to get that data to answer those questions, because these are the questions that you need to answer to do your job, to know whether you're doing a good job or not. So let's get that data. I don't care what you've already got.
So say I am a museum, like earlier, and I want to know what drives people into the museum. Is it weather dependent or seasons? And we have our storyboarding session, and that's what I tell you I want. I want to know what's bringing people in. When should I expect the museum to be busy, and when should it be quiet? What do you then go on and do from there? What's step 2?
So we've got the sort of the main questions. So for example, so it could be what influences visitors going up or down. So from that, that's a single box, and that's got a load of different sort of questions in it, which is basically visitor numbers probably broken down by a load of different dimensions. It could be weather, it could be type of day, whether it's a holiday or a weekend, stuff like that. It could be if you've got a new exhibition on. So we've got a load of answers there. Next, we say, okay, if let's say we see a correlation between visitor numbers going up on public holidays, bank holidays, for example, what do you then, what new questions arise from that? What do you want to know next? And, quite often that's just a why is what they come back with, and we have to okay, thanks, it's a good start. Let's come up with some more hypotheses for maybe why do people come in more on bank holidays? Or I don't know, if it is to do with weather, then okay, why do more people come in on when it's raining or when it's sunny, whatever the answer is. And we just keep on breaking that down, building new boxes with new questions, going all the way along. It can get very branching. I did one a couple of weeks ago that was absolutely huge. There was probably 50 different questions on there, all leading to different actions and stuff. But we always make sure that whatever that chain of questions is, it always ends with an action or a decision. So we want to make sure that we're not just doing analysis for the sake of it, because, we enjoy it, which we do, but there needs to be a purpose to it. And that is for making decisions. So every single question path has to end with, what are you going to do with this information? What decisions are you going to make with this? Who are you going to talk to? Are you going to create a brand new marketing campaign? Something like that. It's got to end with you doing something.
Okay, so now we've got that storyboard, we've got the list of however many questions, and we've got our actions and our response that we need to do. What's next on that stage? That's complete. We're all happy with that. Where do we go now?
So that is choosing the right visualizations, and then making sure that those visualizations are as easy to understand as possible, and making sure that they are, just answering those questions. So choosing the right visualization. Don't actually tend to use that many different types of visualization. If you're comparing, different categories to each other, 9 times out of 10, you're going to want a bar chart. If you're doing trends, it's going to be a line chart. There are some sort of niche cases if you're looking at comparing categories to each other, but there's hundreds of them. You don't want to scroll for ages through a bar chart. So chances are maybe a tree map's a little bit better there. If there's lots of categories and subcategories and just hundreds of them, to get a really good overall picture of all of that, then tree map's probably the best choice. Never a pie chart.
Not a pie chart.
No.
You're not a pie chart fan.
No. The only time I ever use pie charts or donut charts is for a bit of visual flair. So you say you've got, sales versus target, for example. I might do a little donut chart that has a little bar completing. That's percentage of target.
It's almost like a loading bar.
Yeah, exactly. that's a nice little, visual addition that makes the chart, it's not essential, but it looks a bit prettier.
I'm sure people will ask, why not? Why don't you use a pie chart?
They're just better. There are just better visualizations for what they do. I think it's, humans are very good at precisely telling the difference between things like length and width. Yeah. So you've got a bar like that, you've got a bar like that. That difference between them, we're very good at accurately and precisely assessing what that is. When it comes to pie charts and donut charts, we're relying on angle or area, and we are just not as good at telling that difference accurately.
So I guess it's just back to that clarity point we made earlier of you just want to quickly be able to answer the questions.
Yeah.
And that makes it harder.
Yeah, it does.
And it sounds like you're not using many complex visualizations. You're not going out scouring, looking for custom visuals or using aquariums in Power BI.
Oh, I do love an aquarium.
But just keeping it as simple and as you can. Is that the idea?
But yeah, the whole purpose of the visualization is to make things easier to understand than going through like raw data. So you don't want to make things more difficult by introducing complexity. Like if you have to sit down and explain a visual, then something's probably gone wrong somewhere.
Yeah.
You want it to be as intuitive as possible, because ideally you want people focusing on the story that you're trying to tell, not having to spend effort, go, okay, what's going on here then? You show someone a ribbon chart, and if you know how they work, then they're great. But if you show someone a ribbon chart on their own, without any sort of explanation, then they're going to look at it and go, wait, what's going on here? And it's going to probably take 5 or 10 seconds for them to, oh, okay, so actually it's a stacked bar chart, but it's sort of like slinking along and being ranked. So yeah, try and do the minimum possible to convey the story that you want, basically.
Right. So we've got our questions, we've got our visualizations, our bars, our lines, and definitely no pies. Where do we go from there? So
we go there to making them as understandable as possible. And that is by reducing anything that's unnecessary. So we want them to be as understandable and as intuitive as possible for our end users. So they just have to expend as little effort as possible, actually understanding them. And there's a couple of things we do with that. One sort of, principle again is called the data ink ratio, or sometimes called data pixel ratio. This was a sort of concept come up with by Edward Tufte in like the 80s, and then in the early 2000s or 90s, Stephen Few updated it to the data pixel ratio. But essentially, everything on a report page can be broken down into 2 categories: data pixels and non-data pixels. So your data pixels are your bars, the actual lines in your line chart. The non-data pixels is everything else. So axes, labels, titles, backgrounds, stuff like that. And the principle is, or the ratio is, you want to maximize your data pixels as much as possible while minimizing your non-data pixels, while still maintaining an understandable visual. Because you could literally just strip out all the non-data pixels, then you literally just have some bars on a page and no axes and no rules.
There's no context.
Exactly. There's a balance there. We maximize the non-data ink. Sorry, maximize the data ink and minimize the non-data ink. So that is stuff like, if you've got data labels on your bar chart, so little numbers at the end, do you need an axes? Probably not. Or if you've got an axes, you don't need data labels. Assess whether, do you need grid lines at the back? Probably not with the bar chart again, because we're very good at telling the difference between them. So we don't need these guider lines in between. We don't need individual borders around every single visualization, completely pointless. So it's just really questioning the visualization and going, or every element of it and going, are you needed? Are you essential? And removing anything that's not.
And I guess it's almost making sure that the final user isn't going to be distracted by those things. If you've got a massive, thick black border around, you might notice that first before the actual.
Yeah, and you do. I mean, I remember looking at one particular visualization it was a tree map, and the background of the entire report was purple, and then the same purple had also been used in the tree map. So for the longest period of time, I just assumed that the actual largest part of the tree map was just part of the background. So I was looking at this tiny little bit going, okay, that's the biggest, that's the second biggest. When actually there was this massive portion over here I thought was the background and it wasn't.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's stuff like that. You want people to be focusing on what's important to them, so remove anything that's unnecessary.
Right. So that's step 3. And then what do we finally do to make it ready?
Well, there's basically you've reduced the clutter from your visualization. Now it's bringing in the context and focusing people's attention on what matters. Yeah. So going back to the questions that they had to answer, it said like if sales is going lower, and that's what they're interested in, but they're not interested in where sales is higher, they're just not going to investigate that in this report, then let's stick some symbols, stick a bold text, all that sort of stuff on the things that people are interested in. So these are called, got to get it right, pre-attentive attributes.
Wow. Don't hear that 3 times.
No one tried. And these are things that you notice almost, like unconsciously. Yeah. You just immediately, your eyes just drawn to them. And that can be a big one's movement, actually. If you've got lots of still things and one of them's moving, you're immediately drawn to it. But it's also, bold text or italic text. So it's like position and hue, color. There's loads of them. There's like 30 of them. I'm not going to list them all out, and I don't think I could. But the ones in visualization that I think we want to focus on is color is a big one. Really useful for, it can contain information. If you've got the same 3 departments, for example, or same 3 categories repeated across loads of visualizations, if you give them all a color, a separate color, then it means that you can really easily focus on one department across every visualization. If that category or that department is purple on every single visualization, then you know exactly what you're looking for. Whereas if they're all the same color and they were just labeled, you're having to read on every single visualization, and that's just going to take a lot longer to process. So yeah, color's a big one. Symbols are a big one as well. If we've got, you see matrices quite a lot that have up and down arrows on them. Ideally, we should just have down arrows or just have up arrows, because that's going to draw your attention to what you're interested in.
Then see a triangle or an arrow and go, now process.
Yeah, exactly. Otherwise, your backs are going row by row, going, okay, that's an up arrow, that's a down arrow, that's an up arrow, which you don't want.
Yeah. And
there's probably another final step at the end, which is just make it pretty. It's not one that we talk about very often, because we're so focused on the data and the questions and the analysis and things like that. But if you build a report that people are going to be using every day, every week, you kind of want them to, I'm going to say, enjoy using it, but maybe just not hate using it.
Yeah.
And the prettier it looks, the nicer it is to use, means that people are much more likely to actually use it. It's a sad fact, but not everyone uses every single report that you build, unfortunately. You put hours in crafting a beautiful report, you demo it to them and saying, look at all the amazing things that you could do. And then they ask to put it into Excel so they can analyze it themselves. We don't want to do that, or we don't want them to do that. We want to make the report enjoyable to use, which means making it look nice. Yeah. And that's things like, you can have a slight gradient on your background. You can have tasteful use of color. So many times I see, I don't know, an organization's color is like pink or orange. And so every element on every single visualization and the background is orange. And that's just awful to look at, and it's a useless report. Yeah. So yeah, stuff like tasteful use of color, adding in little symbols. If you want to, if you're looking at a sales section of a report, then you could put a little pound sign in there, something like that. As long as it's not drawing attention, needless attention. But yeah, it's just stuff like that. Just makes it much nicer to work with.
So we've got all of these things and ways that we've made. Are there any top tips that you would maybe make sure to include, or more accurately not include, when you do your analysis?
So I think go for like common pitfalls first. I think a lot of the main pitfall that I see is just not including context with numbers. So for example, I see this from even people who have decades of experience in data analytics, and I look at a report that they've built, and somewhere prominent, like up at the top or on the the left-hand side, there's 4 or 5 cards that are just numbers. That's it.
Yeah.
And that provides no information. That is literally just a single data point with no context. Like, if you see a report that says sales 4 million, is that good? Is that bad? Is that higher? Is that lower than last year? Is it below target, above target? Like, where's the context?
Yeah.
You're relying on people's memory of the previous, data refresh, the previous year, the previous month, to go, well, I think it was like 3.8 last year and now it's 4, so I think that's good.
And if you're new to that, or
Well, you don't have that,
new
yeah.
to the space, you don't have that anyway.
Yeah, exactly. So you don't want to rely on people's memory, because, again, that's another sort of mental load that they're having to take on in order to process your report. So yeah, provide context is the biggest one for everything that you do, which again goes back to the storyboarding and why we're doing stuff. I guess another one I see is people get worried if they have multiple copies of the multiple visualizations on a page that are all the same type.
Yeah.
People are very scared to have like 4 bar charts on a page because they think, well, won't the users get bored? It's like, well, no, it's their data. They should be interested in it. And if the problem actually tends to be that they haven't highlighted the story. If you just have 1, 2, 3, 4 on a page, you're not really highlighting anything. There's probably interesting stories there that you could tell with that data, but you've just plonked 4 bar charts on the page. So what I see is that people they'll replace one of the bar charts with a pie chart, and then they'll replace another one with a tree map, completely misused, and all that sort of stuff.
Just so they look different for the sake.
Exactly. And so you're actually making your report worse because you're worried that people are getting bored. Instead, think about changing the size or the position. Maybe one of those bar charts contains a more important question or more important answer to a question than the others. So stick that in your top left and make it bigger, make it more pronounced. Maybe within each bar chart, use colors to highlight anything that's important, going back to your context. If someone is working in a particular department, maybe you highlight their bar on everything, and that makes it more visually interesting. So don't be scared of boring your end user. Just build a story that is more interesting rather than try to mix up visualizations. But I think they're 2 of the biggest pitfalls that I see when people are building reports.
Okay. And then what about the other side? What would make you look at a report and say, yes, that's good. I understand that. I like that.
It's the story, an easily discernible story. It's going from here's the first visualization, and then that immediately leads on to a second visualization that's positioned close to it, and then immediately leads on to a third visualization that answers another question. So it is literally just flowing that story, going, I see that, I see how that leads on to here, and then the final question is answered, and you're like, oh yeah, that's really interesting. There is a really good visualization, I think, which was, it's got a bit of movement in it as well, but I can't remember his name, but it's a guy who's explaining the difference in life expectancy across all countries, and how it's changed from like 1800 to like 2000. And that's just one visualization, but it uses movement to tell the story. And it starts out all in the bottom left, where countries are very poor and have very low life expectancy, 30 or 40. And it's just a scatter chart with every single country on it. And then over time, all of the countries, or a lot of them, kind of move up to being very wealthy countries with life expectancy much higher. So it's showing that this correlation is changing, over time, or they are correlated with each other, and it's improved over time. Just really clear story, excellent visualization skills.
What tools do you use to do these? You've mentioned Figma and Power BI. How would you go about building one of these?
Yeah, so Figma for the storyboarding and wireframing as well. If we want to build a mock-up of a report or dashboard and we don't have access to the data, we might just use Figma to do that, stick a load of stuff on. With an end user, say, might use a bar chart here, and then we'll position this line chart here so that these questions match up to each other, and always do that with the end user to make sure that we are answering their questions that they want accurately. Outside of Figma, we use Inkscape, so an SVG editor, to create images, our logos, buttons, things like that. I think that's better for it. It leads to kind of slight performance improvements in Power BI. If you do it in Power BI, it might be a little bit easier, but that gets reloaded every time you sort of refresh a visual. Whereas if you just stick everything in the background, it's loaded once at the start and then it's static. So a little bit of performance improvement. It kind of looks nicer. You can do like fancy gradients and stuff like that, fancier shapes. I think that's about it for the tools that we use for the visualization side. There's more tools that we use for the like data modeling side. So DAX Studio for debugging DAX or coming up with it's really good for looking at intermediate results. If you've got a really complex measure that does summarize tables in the middle, you can find out what's going on at every single stage by using DAX Studio. And of course, Tabular Editor to just speed everything up.
Thanks very much for watching. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel. For any questions and more information about the tools that Matt said, there's some links in the videos, and we'll see you next time. Bye. Thank you very much, and thank you for watching. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to our channel to stay notified about our new content. Thank you. I'll do that again because I just stopped speaking. Thanks for watching this episode. Don't forget to like and subscribe the video and the channel. Denny's, Thank you very much for joining us on this month's No.